the war, as you know, started in September 1st, 1939. I was 11 and a half years old. When the war started, I remember, as it was starting, I remember the excitement on the part of an 11-year-old of seeing our parents, getting ready and listening to the radio and listening to the news, and there was something kind of, I suppose, exciting about it. Then the war started. My father, who was a reserve officer in the Polish army, expected to be mobilized, but before anything happened, the Germans came to our town. To the best of my recollection, it was on the 8th of September, about a week or 8 days after the war started. And things have changed from then on. First, the day after the Germans came, or maybe 2 days after, they broke into the synagogue and burned the Torahs and destroyed the contents and the furniture. They imposed restrictions on the general population, but more severe restrictions on the Jews. Arrested a number of intellectuals or people that they considered to be leaders of society. Among them was my father, who was arrested by the Gestapo about a week or maybe 2 weeks after the Germans arrived, and so life has changed. It was getting progressively worse. The restrictions that were imposed on us were by themselves small, but progressively more severe, and the penalties were very, very severe. So therefore, for example, one was prohibited from shopping in certain stores, or later prohibited from walking on certain streets, or later required to wear a white armband with a blue Star of David on it, or prohibited from using the trains or the buses. While each restriction by itself was not all that severe, the penalty was very frequently imprisonment or execution, and consequently life has changed. And as time passed, life became more and more difficult. In addition to it, there were Jews, and my parents in particular, were unable to exercise their professions or make a living, and we had to sustain ourselves by slowly selling whatever possessions we had, furniture, fur coats, piano, and so on. So life was difficult, and in addition to it, my friends, my former associates who were Christians, now were quite sensitive to the fact that I was not one of them, and made me let me know about it. I remember the day when our synagogue was destroyed, and when the Germans pulled out the Torahs on the street in front of the building and burned it. And we youngsters were observing it, as wanting to know what the Germans were doing. My Christian friends stayed and laughed and thought that that's kind of a funny incident, where I and maybe one or two other Jews who were there felt a sense of damage, of destructions, and kind of left, destroyed. And so things like this have happened. So my life has changed, both because there were restrictions on the Jews, because there was economic hardship, and because there was a general rejection by those of my friends with whom I associated prior to the war.